So here at American Family Insurance, life's better when you're under our roof because when you feel totally supported and protected, any dream is possible. And that's why we created DreamBank. It's an inspirational community destination and virtual experience that's designed to help people pursue, achieve, and protect their dreams. And at DreamBank, there's something for every dreamer, from our weekly events to immersive signature programmings to special events and our on-demand content. Our free programming and resources are designed to bring you inspiration, motivation, and support no matter your interests. So check out our upcoming virtual and in-person events at amfam.com/DreamBank and reserve your spot today. Um, so I would like to welcome back to the DreamBank stage Spencer X. Smith. So Spencer is the founder of social media marketing company Amplify and an instructor at the University of Wisconsin and Rutgers University. He's formerly a VP of sales for two Fortune 100 companies. Spencer is deemed a social media expert by Forbes and Amplify is the winner of 5 consecutive In Business Magazine Executive Choice Awards for social media consulting company. Spencer has spoken at over 250 events since 2015, including a presentation at the New York Stock Exchange. In his book, Rotoma, the ROI of social media, or excuse me, the ROI of social media top of mind, was featured in Forbes and is an Amazon bestseller. 10-year DreamBank veteran, I welcome back to the stage. Please, let's welcome Spencer Smith.
Thank you, Andy, and thank you everybody for being here as well. Thanks for the active chat. It's been fun to see where people are coming in from. So thank you again for your time today. And I'll keep an eye on the chat as we go through this because this is meant to be as interactive as possible. I don't know if we can handle a deluge of information, but I know Andy will be keeping an eye on it as well. So as promised, these are actionable AI strategies to help automation tools work for you. And what I'm going to be going through here is just some context first, and then get into both some examples, what I've seen as very effective prompts from an automation standpoint, as well as 3 case studies that you can hopefully draw from and use in your own work. So without further ado, where are we in the AI lifecycle right now? And I call this the evolution of learning in 3 stages. So what we started with was stage 1. And just to give you a quick story about this, when I was a freshman in high school, I really wanted to learn about investing in stocks. And I went to the high school library and they had one book on investing, and that book was checked out. So that was it. I was out of luck. I didn't know anybody. I had to wait for the book to get returned. And that's really where we were at what we would call stage 1. So we had limited access and no real-time help. And it was all relegated to physical presences, books, magazines, people. So if had something unavailable at that time, we were essentially stuck. Now, if we jump to where we are right now, and say we're probably between stage 2 and stage 3 as of right now, but stage 2, it almost seems silly to think about the fact that we used to depend on physical resources only to learn things. Now, I wouldn't be a good DreamBank advocate and talk about something aspirational if this weren't true, but if now we look at all the stuff that's available to us for free, ubiquitously, and we want to learn basically anything, we can do exactly that. And that's really what the internet connectivity has allowed us to do, right? Unlimited content, we can do whatever we want. But at the same time, even though this content's free and we might have courses that take you through a process, you can't stop a blog post or ask a book or pause a YouTube video and say, hey, can you go back and maybe expand on what we were talking about? Because it was just a one-way door. And now, when we're jumping into stage 3, what AI learning has allowed us to do is have personalized, interactive, on-demand, infinitely patient, infinitely knowledgeable tutors that allow us to learn anything that we want. And I think this is really, at least from my standpoint, a very positive idea because I've seen some sentiment out there is AI making us dumber? And I would say, well, yeah, if you want to be dumber, you can have AI do a lot of things for you and never question how it actually works. But contrasting that, AI can make us that much smarter as well if we're curious, if we ask questions, and if we use these tools to our advantage. So that's just the context from which we're operating. Now let's get right into how to best prepare for your AI implementation. Okay, so I'm going to walk again just like on the last one from left to right on this. So if we look at AI implementations, what we had from a historical trend here is we move from what we call on-prem, meaning on-premise, so servers and racks of stuff and all these desktop computers that were all tied together. We move from on-prem to cloud. And that was important for 2 reasons. The first is it allowed connectivity throughout, right? So we don't have to go to a specific physical location or use our BlackBerry or whatever we were using back in the day to say, here's where everything lives. Now we can jump between machines or really whatever we want to get the information, get the documents, get anything that we want at any time. But also from a economics standpoint, it moved from OpEx, I'm sorry, move from CapEx to OpEx. So let me just expand on this point a little bit. So if we look at moving from CapEx to OpEx, what I mean by this is we went from things where it required huge amounts of hardware before to now we are using simply software, right? And that is easy to reconcile because we're all here already, but it used to take a lot to do technology-based initiatives, and there was a lot of risks involved with that as well. And Nikki, to your question, we will have the slides available. This entire document I did in Notion here, so we could easily export this, especially as your questions come in and I add or remove things. So we'll make the slides available. So if we look at this from the standpoint of what does the risk look like now? It used to be really, really difficult to have new technology-based initiatives because you'd have to set up all this infrastructure, go through some kind of requirements with your company to go, do we need this thing? What if it doesn't work, et cetera? But now where we are with software is so much of it is tied to any kind of hardware that we have anywhere, meaning the cloud, right? Which is just someone else's computer. So if we launch some kind of software platform, that makes it that much easier to reconcile the fact that we are just spending money every month. So subscription-based services versus a big one-off purchase. So if we look at that then through the lens of what's happening right now, and we bifurcate what's happening within the AI landscape, on the left here we have startups. And that's, everybody's favorite ChatGPT that everybody knows, and it's in the popular vernacular. But then we have Claude and Grok, which is, part of Twitter, X, Perplexity, and others. And their goal is to move fast and to ship updates really quickly. And that's where, like, if you pay any attention to AI at all, especially from their engineering teams in any of these respective companies, they're shipping on holidays, they're shipping on weekends. Like, they don't care, they don't wait, because their goal ultimately is to acquire customers. Now, if you look at the other side of that coin and the mega corporations that are out there, like Microsoft and Google, they're facing a more methodical way of shipping because the last thing they want to do is lose people that are already paying them money. So if I'm Microsoft and I launch a suboptimal version of Copilot that constantly is hallucinating, making all kinds of mistakes, et cetera, then I'm going to lose customers to somebody else. And Google is really in its a very unique situation right now because they are currently facing the innovator's dilemma. And if you're familiar with that, that's where you're knowingly trying to put your current business model out of business by way of what you're actively doing now. And that's one of their challenges right now is mostly ad revenue, but then we have the subscription revenue as well. So how do we offset that? And in fact, Google's Gemini, which used to be called Bard, was delayed a long time because Google had that reticence. But then they figured out, look, we can't wait anymore. Otherwise, we're going to be so far left behind. So if you look at these two goals, very different goals for different startups, different startups, different corporations, they have this battle going on right now. Is who's going to get more customers and how? So my thought about this is we have an intersection right here of cloud and startups. So right now, what's awesome is you and I or anybody else, we can test the latest models with low OpEx, meaning we just pay a little bit of money every month and no subscription commitment. And probably the best way I found to do this within the confines of any team where they have a security apparatus, right? Like you have enterprise data protection controls, SOC 2, NIST, all these things. The ChatGPT Team Edition, which is I think $50 a month, so two people at $25 a month, allows you to have those protections and try the latest and greatest stuff. So then when you can learn from those things and then equip it to your current software relationship, you're that much better off. Meaning we don't have to wait for Copilot to get as good as ChatGPT and others because it is clearly behind. We can practice now in the environments that we're offered. And then once something comes more enterprise level, we can figure out how to best implement that. So that's my ask of you right now is to, after we're done, take these ideas and please run with them. If you haven't already played in this capacity with AI stuff, I'd love to have you at least explore it. And I'm going to ask you later in the chat just to get to an idea as to where we're using AI tools, but that'll come up in just a second. Now, this is a question I get a lot, as you can imagine, especially within certain sectors like financial services, insurance, legal, where I do a lot of work. They're asking, well, which conversations are secure and which isn't? So I'll go back to this old social media adage. And if you're not paying for the product, well, who is the product? And the answer is you're the product, right? So if you're using free tools, you are the product. And every one of these platforms will tell you, look, we're training on your data. So if you're not paying them money, they're not going to protect it. So again, if we're giving one of these companies money, Microsoft, Google, OpenAI, whoever, Grok, whatever you're using, they generally will say, look, if you give us money, we're not going to train on your models. And it really is that simple. Now, we oftentimes will have to go to compliance or your general counsel or whatever that you're within your security apparatus and say, hey, here are these protections that are offered, and here's how it works. But at least be aware of those things when they come up. Is hey, is it secure? Is it not? So now we're going to get into the prompting ideas. Now that we've talked about the framework and the security, and this is what I call prompting like a pro. So this is my three model framework. And I'm going to bring up this link here so you can see it. And this is something I made available for free for any of the users here on this webinar. So I'm just going to grab this URL, share it in the chat if you want to grab it. This is a platform called Gumroad, and you can select your most appropriate style of the prompts that we'll go through. So we have a consulting focused playbook, one for retirement plan professionals, which is pretty niche, I know, and the last one is for legal. And just put in $0, say I want this, and it's yours. And I would probably default to this one first. This is more the general style, but this is really where I play and what we'll go through today to hopefully share some ideas with you that you can then take away and run with. So I'm just going to walk through the content. I'm going to walk through exactly what I have here in the course and show you in real time how I would consider using these within your respective lives, within your respective businesses. So I'll skip the obligatory beginning stuff. And so if we look at these three models, the first is what I would call the turbo model. And this is for generating results quickly for clearly defined tasks. And this is for, as I say, admins, analysts, consultants, operations pros, et cetera, who know exactly what they need. And that's really the operative part. So the way that we use this, and I'm guessing if you've used AI to this point, then you would, let me just check the chat. Can you share the link to what you're sharing on the screen? Let me see. Let me see. Are we not seeing the Prompt Like a Pro free AI playbook? Is that not, maybe?
It's shown on my end, Spencer.
Okay, thanks, Andy. Appreciate it. Okay, so yeah, if you want this, just go right to the URL in the chat. So this is where you probably, if you've used AI to this point, you probably at least dabbled from the turbo standpoint, and that's where we define the desired outcome, write clear, specific instructions. I'm just going to do, since I have a couple more people, I'm just going to reshare that screen. Bear with me. Hopefully this fixes. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I got it. I got it. I got it. I got it. Okay. So, Andy, what I'm going to do, I only sent that link to the host and panelists. Now I'm understanding what people are asking. Okay, my bad. Okay, I will go back to everyone. Thank you for the heads up on there. It wasn't the screen, it was the link. Okay, there we go. That's better. Hey, thanks for the heads up on that, everybody. Okay, so the turbo model is we know definitively. Thanks for the enthusiasm, Terry. I appreciate it. All right, so we define the desired outcome. We write clear, specific instructions, and then this is really the most important part because we've all heard about hallucinations, right? And AI will make stuff up or it'll conflate different ideas. But this is really where it's up to you as a subject matter expert to know what's good and what's not. And that's something we should mention right now within these AI models is a lot of us are used to when interacting with machines because they're programmed, they respond exactly the way that they were meant to interact with us as humans. So if I open the refrigerator door and the light turns on, that's a really good example of machine programming, right? And then I close the door and the light goes off. If I open the refrigerator door and the oven turns on, it's like, well, wait a minute, what's going on here, right? So that's where we can delineate between these machines that we're used to from a programming perspective, exactly acting exactly in the way that we want, and contrast that to these AI models, which are really just trained. So if you think about training, how that differs is think about any sport that you may have played over the years, and you see different people playing in a different style, or maybe you see a basketball team facing off another basketball team, and they're doing some kind of tactics that are a little bit different. It's because they've been trained in different ways to play within the same rules, but yet have a different way to go about doing things. And that's really what AI is doing is looking for patterns, looking for engagement, looking at history to say what worked and what didn't. And that's where we need to keep in mind that these still are not perfect, but they're at least getting better and better as we go through this. So an example here would be a simple prompt like this: draft an engagement summary, email outlining next steps following our discovery session with the client. So if we put this in here, I'm going to just grab this model here, use this. And what's awesome about this, right, is normally I would have to sit down at a blank page in a Word document, Outlook, whatever I'm using, and say, all right, where do I start? And this gets us really quickly from zero to something that's good. And then as of this point, we're making editorial decisions, which Andy had mentioned earlier that I'd written a book back in 2017. It was 274 pages, and it took 6 months to write and 6 months to edit. and it's really hard to edit your own writing. So that's why we have outside editors, right? Is that if I'm taking from my brain and putting onto a screen something, I read what I wrote the way that I intended. And that's a huge gap between what I think and what other people perceive when they read. So what's great about this is as opposed to us writing something and then going, is this good? I think I knew what I was saying. This is really where we're reading something fresh for the first time, and we're becoming an editor of someone else's, meaning the AI's writing. And that allows us much better ways to get there quickly as far as this is good, this is not good. We're really making decisions more by negation than anything else. So this is an expeditious way to do this. I'm going to pause here, just ask in the chat, both A, have you tried it in this capacity? I'd love to know what you're doing. And then B, which tool are you using or which tools are you using to do these kind of interactions, these turbo style interactions?
For the sake of time, too, if anyone wants to raise their hand, I can have you come off mute and
Awesome.
talk as well.
Thanks, Andy. All right, so Chad says Gemini. Now he's starting to use Copilot. We got ChatGPT, another Copilot.
Spence, we got someone to raise their hand here.
Oh
Might
yeah.
have pronounced Teely or Thiele. I'm going to go ahead and give you the stage.
Hey, welcome.
I'm sorry. I was just raising my hand to say that I've used it.
Thank you. Appreciate your participation. It's awesome. All right, so we got a lot of Copilot, ChatGPT for writing. Okay, ChatGPT. Okay, thanks. So we're seeing mostly ChatGPT and Copilot. I'm guessing if you're using Copilot, you're probably using Copilot at work. So I don't know many people that are defaulting to Copilot by choice, unless they're, really hardcore Bing users instead of Google, which would make a lot of sense. All right, so
We've got another person
yeah,
here. One more.
please.
Kimberly. The stage is yours, Kimberly.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Mhm.
Okay, great. So I've used ChatGPT. I've written 2 books myself, and I found it to be very, very helpful to upload a chapter and ask, what am I missing or what added value can I add to this chapter? That was very, very helpful for me.
I love
I
that,
encourage
right?
anyone who's writing a book to do that.
Yeah, thank you, Kimberly. That's a wonderful way. I wish I had it back in the day to help me with that, because oftentimes it'll know our sentiment, but oftentimes when we write, things are rife with implications, right? Like, well, of course I meant this, but unless you wrote it down, it really didn't know what you were saying. So I love that you share that. Thank you.
Exactly. When you put in the prompt, pretend you are the reader, what questions or gaps would be helpful for me to fill in. And it gives you, from that reader's perspective, it's very helpful.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you. All right, so we have a few more come in, ChatGPT, Copilot, Leonardo. Okay, that's the first time I've seen Leonardo in a while. That's awesome. All right. So continuing now, so I feel like this is probably representative of what a lot of us have tried, either personally or professionally, is all right, I'm gonna put in a prompt, kind of guess best what I think it might want or what it might actually achieve for me, and then go from there. But now this is where it starts to get really interesting. And we call this the rate my prompt model. So the idea with this is actually it stemmed a while back when I did we call it, hackathons, right? So you bring a bunch of people in a room and go, okay, here's what we're trying to solve for, and people will just try different things. And it started in early technology, but now I think it transcends a lot of different areas where it's more of a sprint or a scrum. How do we get things out the door more quickly? And this actually was the outgrowth of a hackathon I did about a year and a half ago. And a pretty junior person at a company, she came up with this. So I have to give her full credit for it because I thought it was really, really smart as a way to iterate with the AI. So the rate my prompt model is where we're asking the AI itself for feedback on our prompts. And if you recall when I was talking about those 3 stages and the fact we can't talk to YouTube videos, this is really what embodies stage 3, is where we're asking a tool, how do we use you to get better at using you, which is really awesome. So the way to use a rate my prompt model then is we write our best guess at a prompt, and then we ask it at the very beginning, rate this prompt on a scale of 1 to 10 and tell me what to improve. Now, this first sentence here is the most operative part of it on a scale of 1 to 10, because if we say something like rate my prompt, it's most likely going to come back and say, great prompt, keep up the great work. So this is a way that we can quantify our question and give it a framework in which to operate. So think about any time that we use any of these AI tools, the more that we can take the full set of the world's data and the world's experiences that it has and rein it in and go, all right, right now, all you're really doing is acting as my prompt rater. It'll help it provide you, again, with better questions. So if I were to grab this one as an example, rate this prompt on a scale of 1 to 10, identify key bottlenecks in our client supply chain based on interview transcripts. I grab this, paste it in. You'll notice what it returns to me, which is really cool, is a score. It says, hey, this is 6 out of 10. So the strengths are you have a clear objective, so I know what you want, you're identifying the key bottlenecks, and you're giving me some relevant context. You're going to give me some interview transcripts, so I know the data source from which I'm going to draw my conclusions. But then the limitations, or where things could be improved, is it's ambiguous in scope. So it doesn't specify how long or complex the transcripts are, or what kind of supply chain, are we logistics, manufacturing, etc. I haven't asked for an output format. So I haven't said it should be a list, a summary, a report, bullet points, a structured Word document. So the more context we can give it there, the better off it's going to be. No criteria for prioritization. So it lacks instructions on how to rank or assess the impacts of bottlenecks. And then no instruction on depth or methodology. So it should look for repeated themes, stakeholder mentions, or operational indicators. And what's awesome about this now is we've gone through this enough times with this rate my prompt model that it will actually give me a better score on a prompt that it suggests that I use. And the way that you and I could then use this then is just copy it and then paste it back into the same chat or chart it instead, start a new chat if you like, and then look for the salient stuff that would be specific to you that you can edit. But this is almost like Mad Libs, right? So instead of saying, well, where do we start? It's here's the framework of a complete prompt and just insert the stuff that's most important to you. So it gives you the output that you want. So this one will say analyze the attached interview transcripts and identify the top 3 to 5 recurrent bottlenecks in our client supply chain. And what if I don't want 3 to 5? I could say, give me 8 to 10. Okay, so I'm just inserting what I want. For each bottleneck, briefly summarize the root cause, affected stakeholders, and any mention of attempted or proposed solutions. Prevent findings in a bulleted summary. How about I say a structured Word document? So it allows us to get a lot better right off the bat at getting something more representative of what it is that we want with the AI to do this work for us. So this is something that I think that would really help you if you just, kind of don't quite know exactly what you want, but you have a gist of what you want. Ask it to rate your prompt first, and it's probably going to find things that either based on inference or other things that you might say, oh, of course I was thinking that, but I didn't write it. It's going to help you uncover those things. So I'm just going to check the chat real quick here. Okay, Gemini. Ask Gemini about itself. Thanks, Karen. That's awesome. How can you make use of it for more regular use, not very technical? Norma, to answer your question, I would say normal use is really where it probably excels because it's probably had the most interaction with people historically in quote normal use versus something that would be really niche. So if I'm trying to get answers to a question on civil engineering, it's going to draw from whatever civil engineering corpus of data it has. But otherwise, for more general stuff, it's going to have the entirety of the internet. Now, where I'll caution you though is that if we go more general, it's probably going to give you some results that aren't in line with what it is that you want. So if we rein it in a little bit, just like what Kimberly had said before, like you're a copywriter or a copywriter editor, you're helping me write this book. Help me find things I haven't mentioned. And then it goes, okay, now I get it. I'm writing a book. This makes it a little bit more clear to me. So the more we can give it that operative part of that first prompt, inserting that right at the beginning, it'll help quite a bit. Okay, when I'm working something repeatable after I get to result, oh, Corinne, that's awesome. So what she said is she turns around and asks GPT to write the prompt for me to use next time. So that's really smart. And then to have a repository of prompts, like you should see this repository of prompts I have. And I use Notion, but you could use OneNote or Trello or whatever you want to use. And the more that you get the prompts that are really good, do not rely on the history of the AI software of choice that you have to find things because it's like trying to search through your inbox and go, now where was that heck was that thing from 2 months ago? So if you find something you really like, put it in a place where you know you can discover it easily. And like I said, OneNote, Notion, Trello, those are all really good with that. And then Barb's iPhone actually asks, that's pretty impressive. Does the person you are talking to know they're using AI GPT? Sometimes. What's usually a dead giveaway, Barb, now that you went down that road, a couple things. If we have an elongated hyphen here, that's almost always AI output because I don't know any of us who use that in real life. And then there's 2 words. Let me just show you PubMed here. So PubMed is if I work in medicine or medical research, this is where I publish my findings. And there are two words that you'll see a lot from AI that normally in our everyday language, we probably don't use as much. And it's actually kind of cool because you can look at the data to back this up. So if I go to the word delve, this is the historics on the word delve used in medical research. So kind of plotted along for a while at very, very little. And then you'll notice that in 2022, it's 631 instances of delve. And then 2023, which happens to coincide with the ChatGPT explosion, we had that. So we went from 631 to 2,800. And now last year, when ChatGPT and others got really prolific, we had 10,000. So if you see the word delve, it's probably AI written, I'm guessing. And the other one depends on where you're from. I had somebody in a session in Atlanta yesterday who's from Ireland. They said tapestry. I say tapestry. I don't know which the right one is, but you're going to notice the same thing with tapestry or tapestry. Huge increase. Okay, so those two words are pretty interesting. So yeah, happy to share your PubMed link here in a moment. Yeah, I'll do that. There you go. There's PubMed. All right, so let's get back to I'm going to check one more question here, Tracy. I will prompt to keep the response casual when asking for help with a reply or response to something. This helped me not look like a computer generating that I can almost always personalize it a bit further. I love that too. I do that a lot too. Tracy, if I'm trying to come up with something clever to reply to somebody, which because I'm not very clever, especially on a text, if I'm trying to be funny, I'll have ChatGPT write something for me and then make my edits. All right, Stacy likes the dashes. All right, cool. I like that. All right, so the last one is the connect the dots model. And this is really, again, back to that aspirational concept here at DreamBank with the first of the three stages, right? It was just us taking whatever we could. Second was inputting all of this digital stuff. And then the third one is now, well, how do we get better at thinking? How do we get better questions and better answers as a result? So this is great for strategic planning, client innovation, team collaboration, future proofing, whatever you want to call this. It's for that higher level thinking. So it's not quite the mechanics, but other things. So this is the process then where we share the opportunity. We ask the AI, what questions or which questions should I ask you, AI, to improve this? And then let those answers by selection, you can select the answers, decide your next move. So the way this might work is let's say I want to, what questions can I ask an AI to improve how we structure clients discovery sessions for strategic planning engagements? That's a good one. I like that one. Okay. So let's plug this in. Now, again, that first part is the most important, right? What questions or which questions can I ask an AI? So not which questions, what questions can I ask you? And to improve your structured client delivery or discovery sessions, you can ask the AI questions. So what's awesome about this output is I'm asking for which questions to structure client discovery sessions. Okay. So it starts with, well, we have some session design and flow. So zooming out before we get into a session, how does this work? Then we have client context and readiness. So it's just categorizing each of these respective sets of prompts. And then we have information extraction, et cetera. But what it's giving us here is it's giving us a prompt that we can then feed back into the machine and say, as an example, if I'm looking through the lens of session design and flow, what is the optimal structure for a 60 to 90-minute strategic planning discovery session? And then it's going to allow us to process through these things. So if you look at any of these, go, well, what's really important to me? Well, if I think about my session design or my flow when it comes to client discovery, when I'm having those formative conversations to figure out, is this a good fit? Are we going to work together or not? I could maybe use something like this. What frameworks should I use to surface strategic priorities quickly? So grab that one, take the output, again, put that in a nice document you can keep somewhere, and then say, okay, I'm good with this. Like, let's use a framework that it derives for us. And then let's get into the next questions, client context and readiness. Like, how do I assess whether the client's leadership team is aligned with the core mission and goals? Prompt it, see what it comes back with, and put that in the document. So we can have a working document as we go through. And then you can look at this stuff. And a lot of these, you might just say, hey, this isn't really I'm not really not worried about information extraction. All right, skip it. Facilitation techniques, I don't know if I really need that. Post-session synthesis. All right, well, what about what follow-up questions should I ask about post-session to clarify ambiguous output? So again, it gives us a way to, again, by negation, go, is this good? Is this not? And then use it for your own purposes. Now, with this connect the dots model, what it's really looking at is disparate ideas, right? It's going, well, I have all of these concepts in mind and I'm asking you for questions. And then we can start to take and connect each of these respective ideas back to a core concept. And another thing that I really love about this connect the dots model, and this is maybe just tangential to asking it for prompts, is using it to form analogies. As an example, let's say I want to learn, I don't know, quantum physics, right? I could go to Google and type in quantum physics tutorial or whatever. But let me ask you in the chat here real quick, what's a show that you have been into lately, like a Netflix show or Apple TV or some kind of serial drama or comedy or something like that? We got Doctor Who, Yellow Jackets, Outer Banks, Andor, Severance, Last of Us, a lot of good ones. Four Seasons. Cool. Drive to Survive. All right. So let's just say I'm just going to take the Severance one from Nikki because I think that might be appropriate here. So say using Severance as, if I can spell, sorry, as an example, help me understand quantum mechanics or physics, I said, right? Help me understand. Use analogies. Jeez Louise. To help me understand, help me get there quickly. So what we're doing is if I were to go on Google somewhere else and say, all right, how does severance or quantum physics align? It's probably not going to find anything on the web. It might find some stuff. I mean, Google is definitely going to give you something, right? But it's probably not going to be that good because I'm guessing no one's written an article on quantum physics through the lens of severance. So what it's doing now is it's taking these two disparate ideas, as I mentioned, and it's marrying them and it's going, all right, here's this thing I know a lot about. Here's this other thing I know a lot about. How do they tie together? So superpositioning, one of the core concepts of quantum physics, that's your innie and your outie. So if you're not a Severance fan, you're probably this is Greek to you, but it's a great show. It starts a little slow, but it's awesome. So what it's doing is it's taking something I already know, meaning Nikki in this case, something I know really well. So I know this character, I know what these mean, I know what this means, right? And it's going, hey, you know that thing in the show? That's exactly like this, or very close to this. And it's going through each of these respective ideas, superposition, entanglement, observer effect, wave particle duality, and it's allowing us to learn through the lens of what we already know. And this historically has been called positioning. So positioning is a pretty old marketing book by two fellows named Trout and Reese. And what they talked about is think about the metaphor would be in a closet, you have a white collared shirt. And it goes, hey, you know that white collared shirt? Well, just like that white collared shirt, this is a red shirt, but it has long sleeves and no collar. And you go, okay, well, I can get there. I can envision what that looks like at least. And that was the argument that they made when it came to how 7 Up became known as the Uncola is 7 Up is kind of this company that's, hitting above its weight, so to speak, and they really didn't have the budget that the Pepsi and Coke companies did. And they said, well, we know, meaning 7 Up knows, we have a bunch of money that's been spent on Pepsi, a bunch of money that's been spent on Coke. You know Coke and Pepsi, right? And the consumer says yes. Okay. Well, we're not those, but we're this. So they're borrowing all of their mind share from Pepsi and Coke and going, well, this is really what we are, is something a little bit different. And that's where we can go with this thing. So that this concept of connecting the dots, that anytime that you want to learn anything new, or maybe explain something that you know really well to somebody who doesn't know it as well, it's called the curse of knowledge, right? How do I take a step back and go, how do I unlearn all this stuff that I know about this? You can then take those concepts and apply it to somebody else. So if you know something extraordinarily well and go, how do I explain it to somebody who maybe doesn't know as much as I do? That would be great. So I noticed something, Caroline had said this, I'll often prompt explain like I'm 12 years old. I love that. So if we think about the hierarchy, now that Caroline mentioned that, oh, thanks, Chad. Yeah, I agree. Totally an amazing way. I mean, we've never had a model like this before. So a couple shorthand things is ELI 5 is explain like I'm 5. Let's stick on the quantum physics things. It's hard and a little bit difficult for people to wrap their head around. At least for me, it definitely is. So ELI 5, imagine you're watching a magic show where a coin is flipped, heads or tails. Okay, it's both heads and tails at the same time. Pretty awesome, right? So this is a really good place to start. So ELI 5 is that shorthand. And if you're good with this and you can understand this, which if you can, you're smarter than I am, then we do ELI 12. Same topic. Now it's going to advance it. And then you can imagine where we're going to go next, right? ELI 18, high school graduate, college graduate, postdoctorate, like whatever level of understanding you want, it can continue to delve to delve deeper and deeper into these topics for you. So it's a wonderful way to connect the dots on really pretty hard stuff that normally would be almost impossible to do on your own. And thanks for everybody in the chat, by the way. So this is the three models. And as I said, within the chat, just go and grab this for free because I hate to give you, all these concepts, which I worked on a long time and not give you a demonstrable takeaway. So that's those three models for you. Now, if we go back to the proper presentation here, I'd like to walk through three example use cases. Let me just make this screen a little bit smaller here. So it's a little easier to read. Okay, so I'm going to walk through three real life ELI, Neil deGrasse Tyson. I love that. That's awesome. I'm a big Neil deGrasse Tyson fan. So example use case one is, and these are each with three different styles of the tools. So not as much tied to real, the tools specifically, but really the styles of tools. And these are all three real use cases that I'm hoping you can then, take a step back and go, okay, this is something I know that I can maybe use in my day-to-day. So example use case one is using what's called the Minto pyramid to make better and more consistent communication processes with you or other people with whom you work. So here is a typical leadership email with embedded to-dos and ambiguous meaning. Okay. So you thought you were going to attend a webinar and learn a bunch of stuff, and I'm just going to read you this email. Not really, but at least give you the gist of it. So this is pretty typical, right? Of somebody who's high up at a company goes, we had a meeting. I'm going to sit down and let me just document all the stuff as it comes to me. So want to take a moment to update on the meeting. Smithson account remains priority. Q3 deliverables, lightly touched on, spoke to Karen, mentioned the deck we sent over. Slide 8 needs revising, back and forth how to frame that. Good idea to review where we stand on the legal front. Legal hasn't flagged anything. So it's just all of this stuff, right? So if we think about these styles of emails, which I know I'm guilty of sending, and I'm guessing you probably received one in your career as well, is these are rife with embedded to-dos where we don't know, okay, am I doing this? Is this just you talking? Is there something we're supposed to actually accomplish here? So what the Minto pyramid does a wonderful job of doing is it takes really very hard to understand messages, right? That oftentimes will be a little bit convoluted and puts it into a framework. And all the AI tools understand this because Barbara Minto, who wrote this book, Minto Pyramid, she's a McKinsey consultant and she worked a lot with the military. So generals would have all these lieutenants, and the lieutenants would come to the general and she'd say, hey, I just need the key idea. Like, just tell me what you think. And if I want the data, I'll ask you for it. But look, we have so much going on. I just need to know what I should do right now. I trust you, but let me know what the data is so I can find it. Okay. So if we structure our old way of communication, which is again this email that's people are going to read it in 100 different ways because it's 100 different ideas. If we just start and then identify the subject and structure the content as it occurs to you, that's fine if that's the way to get it out of your mind. But if you put it through the lens of the Minto pyramid, we then have a structure through which everybody ideally should read these communications the same way. And this will really help when it comes to connecting dots for people again and helping them know what it is that they're supposed to be doing. So the Minto pyramid, put simply, is there's a key message, you support the key points with your arguments, and you present the detail and evidence. So all the data points, figures, and results. So all we really need to do is if we have this long email like the one I showed you, or maybe just you have a stream of consciousness that you type out, say apply the Minto pyramid to this email and then insert the email. And so here's the output. Okay, so it took that wall of text that we had before, subject, immediate next steps. We need to, one, update the deck, two, proactively engage legal, three, establish a recurring checking cadence. So here are our to-dos. Boom, boom, boom. Supporting documentation below. So think about if we're trying to structure something where we're having a hard time helping people understand where it is that we're coming from, especially if there's embedded to-dos or things that are asking them to do. This before you send an email, before you put something together in a message that you're sharing on a project, if you put it through the lens of the Minto pyramid, I think you're going to get much, much better communication. And it's going to help you a lot when it comes to having those meaningful conversations, especially digitally, where people are getting information asynchronously. All right. Brian says on joint staff, this is bluff, bottom line up front. I love that. Awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Brian. I appreciate it. Any thoughts or questions before I get into the last two use cases about the Minto pyramid or anything else? Just for a quick pause for a water break here. Oh, Chad asks, I understand the ELI 1218 concept. ELI is explain like I'm. So ELI, explain like I'm, and then fill in the blank. See none. We will continue. Are these slides available? Yes, Sandy, they will be available. All of this that I'm sharing will be available for you. All right, so the next one is using one of the AI think models to transform spreadsheet data into actionable reports. And I'll give you a real case study here. I'm on what's called the Wisconsin Technology Council here in Madison, Board of Directors. And here's our situation. So we have a membership spreadsheet that has company names, company locations, individual contact names, their membership start and end dates, what they're paying for their membership and their industry. So a big old spreadsheet. And our membership committee is tasked with driving growth. We could just distribute the spreadsheet, call the committee members, but each recipient will have their own interpretation, right? So here's a spreadsheet. What does it mean? I don't know. So I could clarify by writing a report, but that's going to take a long time, right? So to take a spreadsheet and go, now what are all of the ways that I can manipulate this data to have it tell a story? And here are just an example from the website. A lot of the companies you may recognize if you're in Wisconsin or otherwise, and they're pretty well known. So the prompt here is I do an in-depth analysis of the spreadsheet and give salient insights using your expertise and as an executive level data analyst. Now I'll show you, I have a redacted copy I'm going to share with you here. So this is the redacted copy. Okay. So if you can imagine, I'm going to have everybody's first and last name here. I'm going to have their email address. I'm going to have the amounts that they paid. So that's what I can't share with you. But what I can share with you is this spreadsheet goes from left to right and has a lot of information about all of the members. And again, if I were to just share this with everybody and say, well, here's all the information, it's up to them to then say, well, right click, sort, ascending, sort by industry, sort by who's paying us, etc. But I could, instead of doing that, use an AI tool to help me write that report that I referenced earlier that normally would take me a really, really long time to write. So again, back to that idea of the prompt, I said, as an expert data analyst, write me a report about this. And this is again another redacted copy, so it omits all the dollar figures, but at least it gives you an idea as to what the output would look like. Okay, so this is a structured Word document, meaning it's already formatted. The way that you see it right now is exactly the way it was formatted to give to me. So here are the headline metrics. So top 20% of members as far as their share of revenue, members expiring, distinct membership tiers, what categories they're in by tier, the discounts that might be applicable, any industry mix and diversification that we might have, all of the subsets here of what people are paying and how they're paying it, and then the key takeaways. And once we had our membership committee and used that spreadsheet as a working document and said, here's all this stuff, and people were again doing all the respective stuff separately. I then delivered this document and said, okay, here's everything that we talked about, but it highlights exactly what it is that we need to align on. So again, there's no question as to what's important in this spreadsheet and what's not. I'm actually giving them all the important information. That said, if you haven't tried this, meaning any of these think tools here to do this work, I really ask you to consider doing that. And the way that you can use Think tools then, and Think, the reason I mentioned Think is the standard LLM models. So your ChatGPTs and Groks and whatever else you might be using, they're not that great when it comes to math, but these Think models are much better. And the way that we use the math models then is if I go into here and I have a paid for version of ChatGPT, this is the $20 version that I'm showing you right now, and I drop down to O3, it says it's using advanced reasoning. That's where it's going to think before it answers, and it's going to do math a lot better because it's going to use code. So Grok has a think model. Gemini has a think model. Copilot, of which I'm aware, does not have a think model quite yet. I hope it launches pretty soon. But this is the way that we can manipulate spreadsheet data to get the outcomes that we want in a little bit more expeditious fashion. Any questions about using this way, so to turn numbers into a story? Chad says he's testing secure company Copilot has given great results for drag and drop Excel files, analyze in bar graph sheet 3. Yeah, I believe it. Within Copilot, if we have the Excel and Word stuff going on, it works pretty well as long as it's drawing from the data set that we want, and as long as you have what the tenant rights, as Microsoft calls it, on those. And SL says, does it offer data visualization? And the answer is yes. It does a lot of data visualization. So it'll do bar graphs or line charts or stack graphs and then Barb's asking, is the info always reliable? I would say Barb, I would say not always, nor will it ever be always reliable. But once we read this report and I put it side by side, so I take the Word document and I take the spreadsheet that I showed you, and I read the Word document and I verify that it's right by using my Excel formulas, that makes it much more quickly accessible to me. And then I don't have to actually write all the text, but I do double check the numbers. So thanks for asking that question. All right, so that's the second one. And then the third one, this is called Perplexity. So Perplexity is a little bit different than the other tools that you may have heard of that are out there that are being used quite a bit. And Perplexity is more of a AI wrapper as opposed, let me just refresh this and get rid of that. 1 second, please. Okay, Perplexity. So it's more of a wrapper as opposed to a large language model itself. And it's really drawing on data sets that I can find online by using any of the available sources that are on the web and then deducing based on what it finds source-wise, what the report is that you want. So the reason I want to bring up Perplexity Deep Research specifically is it takes near zero effort to do this. And right now, because Perplexity is still pretty early as far as trying to get in the cultural zeitgeist, you get 3 free queries per day as of right now. And if you haven't tried this, I think you are going to be absolutely astounded by how good this does when it comes to doing deep research for you and finding results. So what we talked about with these example use cases, right? Number one was trying to do things a little bit better, right? How do we take communication and fix it? And that can apply to any LLM. And then example use 2 was the think models. So how do we go back and forth and have this thing talk to itself? It's actually pretty cool. You can watch it talk to itself and answer questions, especially when it comes to math. And then this last one is the deep research. So if we were to delineate between these models, we just have your core models, your think, and then your deep research. And deep research will allow us to go off and allow the tool actually to go off and find anything online and then consolidate everything and then put it into a way that you can best understand. So let me just give you the backstory on this one. There's a speech on April 22nd, again, with the Wisconsin Technology Council. This woman here, Dr. Joe Handelsman, is the director of the Wisconsin Institute for Discovery here on the University of Wisconsin-Madison campus. And I went to a talk of hers, and this was on a Tuesday. And on Thursday of that same week, she was flying to DC to talk to the US senators who are responsible for NIH funding, so National Institute of Health, because a lot of that was pulled back. And she just, in passing during her talk, she said, quote, I'm visiting the United States senators on NIH funding on Thursday. I know there's been a reinstatement of the NIH funding for COVID, but I haven't had the time to research it. So post her talk, I emailed her. I said, "Hey, Dr. Joe, great talk. I understand you're flying to DC early on Thursday. Would it help you if I did some research on how COVID funding got reinstated and sent that to you so then you could use that as a model to show these senators who are responsible for science funding? How do we take the same thing that we did with COVID and do it for maybe the medical research that we're doing here on campus?" And she said, yeah, that'd be awesome. So I went to Perplexity and I used this prompt. So this will be in the URL. I shared this publicly because nothing about this is proprietary or protected or anything like that. So all I said within Perplexity, and again, let me just show you real quick so I'm not confusing this. So here's Perplexity. If I go to deep research here, you're going to see that even if you sign in with a free Google account, you're going to have 3. Okay, so this is where we do deep research right here. So you turn that on. And all I said was I read recently that many of the early COVID grants were reinstated, and I'm hoping you can build some parallels with the shutdown of NIH funding here in the US. What could reinstatement of those grants from COVID mean for the NIH if it did follow a similar path? So here's the full report. It's 15 pages, and we're certainly not going to belabor it, but 2 things are important about it. A, it's verbose, right? There's a lot here, but then also it's citing all of the respective resources. So back to Barb's question, is this info always reliable? I would say Not always, but it's pretty darn good if it's gauging what it's responding based on contemporary sources, which is obviously a caveat. So if I scroll up here and look at the beginning, what I want you to take a look at is two things, okay? This searched 55 sources when I was doing other work. So I just let this thing run in the background of my browser. It took about, I think about 12, 13 minutes or so. It searched all of these sites by itself, which would have taken me, I don't even know how. I mean, A, I wouldn't have done it because I wouldn't even know what I was looking for. But then B, it would have taken me hours and hours of research to do work like this. So those are the 55 sources from which it drew its conclusions. And then if you look at tasks here, you can actually see as it talks to itself. Okay, so this first part here is Perplexity talking to itself. All right, now that I know this, the next step is to gather recent information regarding the reinstatement of COVID grants. Okay, then it goes and searches, finds a bunch of stuff. It reads these articles, and then it goes, all right, the next step is to search for news or expert opinion. Reads this stuff. Next step, next step, next step. So we can ascertain as we watch these things and how they think, we can understand better how it's doing research. So if it's congruent with what it is that we would like to do. So let's just say it didn't give me exactly what I wanted. As an example, I could then tell it, hey, based on what I saw that you're doing here, I saw that you're drawing from X resource. Go draw from Y resource instead and be predisposed to go to this resource instead or whatever I want. So this gives me a look behind the curtain as to what's happening. So it's not the Dr. Oz situation where like everything behind the curtain is off limits. This is where it's revealing everything that it's doing. So Lauren says, what tool did you use to get the sources and all the website? Was that through a paid chat? In this case, Lauren, it's just Perplexity's doing it on its own. So all you see here is this. This is my only prompt that I gave it. And then I chose the deep research option within Perplexity, and it did all this work. So back to that example from Dr. Joe, where she and I were going back and forth on email. I said, "Hey, would you like this?" On early Wednesday morning, I delivered her this report. Again, it was 15 pages that she printed out, read on the plane, and has all of these citations that you can use. So if there are any questions that she has when it comes to the meeting with the US senators, she can very quickly find that resource and share it with them. So this, when I first saw this tool, like I've been amazed with a lot of AI tools, but this is going way beyond what I expected was possible, especially this quickly. The fact that I could read, 55 different sources and come up with a really well-written document that we could then use to actually affect change. So Andy, thank you. Lauren says we use Perplexity as a separate tool for research. Yes, yeah. Thanks for that question, Lauren. Let me see if I can find your question again. Is it the one? So for the spreadsheet analysis, that would be the think model. So the first model that we were using, those are more the general models. Use the Minto pyramid that we mentioned here. Let me just go back through this. So this is the Minto method. So any large language model that you use, I mean whatever you want, it's going to know what the Minto pyramid is and give you exactly what you want. When it comes to the spreadsheet analysis, so we talked about, Chad mentioned Copilot and how it can do that. Any of the AI think models will do better with numbers, especially when it comes to reading into numbers and telling the narrative behind the numbers. And then the last ones would be the deep research tools, which are an option within Perplexity. ChatGPT, Rock now has one, Claude has one. But the reason I want to bring up Perplexity is they do have the 3 free queries per day right now. And I think you'll really be impressed with it before those go away, because all of these companies are bleeding cash like crazy, as you can imagine, because they're just trying to get more people. Yeah, you bet, Laura. Okay, Corinne says, how are you positioning your social media marketing agency with AI? Which model do you use the most? Gosh, I should probably update my bio with DreamBank. The one Andy was kind enough to read is quite a bit in the past. I think I've done now 400 in-person speeches, so I should have been better about doing that. But the social media marketing agency, that is more just doing consulting for those firms right now. And I'm more doing emerging technology work, so between blockchain and AI. So to answer your question, Kareem, more specifically, I know a lot of marketers like Claude quite a bit. A lot of them like ChatGPT. Many use many of them and just ping them back and forth and give them all the same prompt and see which gives you a better answer. But there's myriad stuff that's out there. Canva's got a great AI tool as well. All right, Sandy says, bravo, thank you. Nikki says, their way to upload a report structure with prompts and then input some information and it can generate the report for you. Nikki, yes. So let me just repeat that question. Is there a way to upload a report structure with prompts and then input some information and it can generate the report for you? Yeah, Nikki, what I would do first is develop a uh, prompt template and then offset the things that you want to be representative of your specific data, input those, and then give it a sample output of what you want. So if you give it a sample output and say, here's a document that I wrote or a spreadsheet that I built or whatever, use this as a basis for understanding what it is I want from you. It will then try to replicate that as close as it can. So my first prompt in that case would be something like, analyze this document, spreadsheet, PowerPoint, whatever you want. Analyze this and tell me what you think. And if it comes back and it's indicative of what's true, then it's probably going to be able to match your output pretty well. What I can tell you though, along those lines is if we think about reports where these large language models don't do too well is with images and bitmaps. So you've probably seen a lot of the AI generated images, right? But the text is usually pretty bad because it's trying to place individual pixels. I find that it's much better when it comes to actually replicating through a web style interface. So if you can have it do web style pages, HTML output, Tailwind, CSS, something like that, it's going to replicate a lot better. So if you have something that's web based and it has code, that's where I'm trying to go with this, as opposed to bitmaps, which are a bunch of those dots all over the place. If you have code, you can give it code and say, generate something just like this. It's going to go, cool. I know exactly what to do because I understand as a computer, I understand code and I understand pictures as well. Whew, that was a big explanation. Thank you for that great question. Drew says, can you provide the sources of research? Please review these 10 Google Docs or these 12 competitor websites. 100%, Drew. That's a really great way to spy on your competitors is to just say, hey, here are these 12 companies I know we're going to bat with all the time on the same clients or the same, customers that we're targeting. What are they up to? Give me their strong points, their weak points. If you were trying to find a counterfactual to what they're claiming, how would we do that? So it's really good. The more specific we are, the better it's going to be if we just zoom out and look at it that way. Krim says, do you consult to help small startups? I would say, Krim, probably try this stuff first and then see if it works for you and see if you get better at it. So consulting training is usually through DreamBank and others. So thank you for asking that. SL says, can you recommend a tool for building an app using AI? All right, Andy, I know I have almost no time left. Let me just show you one. Lovable.dev. This is awesome. Shoot, I'm not logged in. Shoot. Let me see. This is called a vibe coding tool. And I'm not going to go into vibe coding right now. But let's say, as an example, I wanted to come up with. So this is a tool. I came from the 401k industry before, and I went back and forth with this thing. Basically, you just tell it to build something. You tell it to build a web app or a website, and it's going to build it for you. And you're going to see everything in graphical form here that you ask it to do. So lovable.dev is one of the sweet vibe coding tools that I'd maybe consider using. And Kathy says, and this will be the last question, I think, to be respectful of time. I use ChatGPT for creative writing. Do I need to worry about my writing being taken or stolen? I would say, Kathy, not at this point. No. Pamela says, which AI is best for content and creating PowerPoint in Spanish? PowerPoint Copilot is pretty poor right now. I like, man, if we can use Claude, I would say probably Claude is really good with PowerPoints, or at least giving something that would be representative of a slide deck that you can then take screenshots of, and that's kind of arduous. Take screenshots and then output it to PowerPoint, but PowerPoints themselves have been pretty difficult to match up imagery, text, and then how those things align with each other. All right, Andy, I think we are at time, sir. So I want to make sure that we do our thing here.
Yeah. What a wealth of information. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Spencer, for taking the time to put this together. Obviously, all of the time, energy, and effort that has gone into researching, utilizing these tools. I was following along, and I know that I'm going to have to go back and watch the recording just because there were so many great nuggets in there. And I think that's a great point just because we had a lot of the similar questions. This event is being recorded, will be shared to the email address in which you used to register today. So keep an eye out for that. Spencer, as we kind of conclude here, obviously you've been familiar with DreamBank for numerous years at this point. We are a community that is built of fellow fearless streamers. We always like to ask our presenters as we close, what's one piece of advice you have for someone who's actively pursuing a dream right now?
Man, I would say to keep with the theme of today, use an AI tool to ask a question about something that you're considering. So is my dream viable, right? And then have it tell you either good things or bad things. And I find that oftentimes, Andy, we actually have more conviction knowing if it says, here's all the bad stuff that could happen, and you go,
Mhm.
I'm good with that. Well, then you really know. Like it's looking around the corner before it happens for you. So I would say maybe use a tool that way to say, what am I missing here?
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much for that. And just kind of wrapping up with all of the positive sentiments that are coming through here. Best short AI webinar I've seen. Thanks so much for that. Yeah. And I agree. This was phenomenal. Some questions in regarding to the YouTube link. I will email you the actual link to this recording to the email address and you used to register today. So keep an eye out for that there. And then also too, you all should have that brief follow-up survey. Would really appreciate if you could take time to fill that out. But with that being said, Spencer, thanks again. Such a wealth of information. Thank you all for taking time out of your day to join us here. Hopefully you got something out of this. With that being said, we will go ahead and cap it there, and we will see you all next time. Take care.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.